Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my must-start and my must-sit running backs for week number 3 of the 2021 fantasy football season. At the beginning of the video, we're going to be talking about my must-start running backs based upon their matchup in week number 3 of the 2021 fantasy football season, and then about halfway through the video, we're going to pivot into my must-sit running backs based upon their matchups as well. But before we get on into the deep dive of the running back position, I would just like to ask that if you guys do end up enjoying and you are new to the channel, to please make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button down below. And if you do end up enjoying the video, to please make sure that whether you are new or not, to hit that like button down below. So without further ado, let's get into the video. We begin with the must start category with James White, running back of the New England Patriots. Right now this week he is playing up against the New Orleans Saints. Now, following the exit of Cam Newton and the Patriots inserting Mac Jones into the starting quarterback role, the door opened much wider for the potential of James White to have an excellent season, despite the fact that in Carolina with Christian McCaffrey, Cam Newton was a dump-off machine, just throwing the ball his way. With James White, it was the complete opposite. James White was not getting very many looks last season. It was as if Cam Newton didn't give a fuck at all about dumping the ball off, and he just refused to do it. While White is unlikely to grace 10-plus rushes a game, all of his value really comes from his receiving work. He saw 6 targets for 6 receptions and 45 yards last week up against the New York Jets, and added in 5 rushes for 20 yards as well as a touchdown. White is an extremely safe running back week in and week out due to that receiving floor, and if he ends up finding his way into the end zone here up against the Saints, then he could be a top tier value at the position. I believe he's a guy that could easily finish inside of the top 24 on the week. The New Orleans Saints is probably one of the more confusing matchups though, because in week number 1 up against the Green Bay Packers, these guys looked dominant on defense. The offense was dominant, and then in week number 2 last week, the Saints going up against the Panthers, they looked fucking terrible. It seems like they had no idea what they were doing, but I expect it to be a little bit more of a mix between the two this week. James White is clearly a focal point in this offense for Mac Jones, and how this offense is working, where they look to make these short throws for Mac Jones, which will obviously help out James White, so he is a must-start running back on the week. Next up, we're moving to Chicago with running back David Montgomery going up against the Cleveland Browns this week in Cleveland. Montgomery is coming off of a down performance in week number 2 when compared to his excellent start in week number 1. We saw him torch the Rams defense for over 100 yards and a touchdown in that game, with him almost taking that long run to the house. It was like a 50-60 yard rush right at the beginning of the game. In week number 2 up against the Bengals, I personally expected him to have a huge game because this is a much softer defense when compared to the LA Rams, and he didn't play that well, right? He had 61 rushing yards, though we did see an uptick in his receiving work, getting 3 catches on 4 targets for 18 yards. Now again, that isn't an excellent game, but it also was not terrible. The Browns' run defense has been relatively solid this season, but they have only faced the likes of Mark Ingram and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So obviously, you would expect them to play pretty good up against those running backs. I expect Montgomery to have a bounce-back game this week up against the Browns, especially since I think with Justin Fields under center, this team is going to be able to move the ball a lot more effectively. Next up, we have Chase Edmonds, running back of the Arizona Cardinals, going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. But before we talk in-depthly about Chase Edmonds, I would like to give you guys a quick word from Yahoo. Start the NFL season off right with Yahoo Daily Fantasy. To celebrate, we have a brand new exclusive deal thanks to our partnership with Yahoo, where you guys can get 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum. You heard that right, 2 free months. To qualify, you need to be a new user to Yahoo, sign up for an account via the link in the description, deposit, and play. That is it. Yahoo will send us your name after you play in your first paid contest, and we will reach out to you via email with your coupon. If you need immediate access because you want to play today, please email support@awesemo.com. Again, support@awesemo.com, and we will get you set up. Just to emphasize, this offer is for new Yahoo users only. If you are already a Yahoo user, then you will not be eligible for this promo. So please make sure that you guys sign up for Yahoo to get those 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So back on into the video. The next running back we're going to be talking about, like I said, is Chase Edmonds, running back of the Arizona Cardinals, going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. Edmonds is in for a big game this week because the defense on the other side, the Jacksonville Jaguars, just is not that good at all. The Cardinals offense is scorching hot, and they look basically unstoppable at this point. Now, they haven't necessarily faced these top 10 defenses thus far, playing up against the Vikings as well as the Tennessee Titans, but hey, that's not going to change this week because they get the Jacksonville Jaguars of week number 2 up against the Minnesota Vikings. Edmonds had 8 rushes for 46 yards, as well as catching all 5 of his targets for 29 yards. He has yet to score a touchdown this season, which I feel like is destined to change with how many points the Cardinals are putting up week in and week out. The Cardinals are just hanging an immense amount of points on every defense they play against. Last week, up against the Minnesota Vikings, they scored 34 points, and up against the Titans, they scored 38 points. So expect Edmonds to have a heavy workload this week in Jacksonville, and if he finds his way into the end zone, he could potentially finish as a top 12 running back on the week. Now on to my must-sit running backs for week number 3. We begin with Myles Gaskin, running back of the Miami Dolphins, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas. Now, entering the season, Myles Gaskin was in a relatively solid situation. While many were calling for a committee, that never ended up actually happening, and Myles Gaskin is the clear lead dog in Miami. And this isn't necessarily a awful matchup up against the Raiders, as Najee Harris and a combo of Tyson Williams and Latavius Murray played relatively fine up against them. But with that said, the offensive line in Miami, I'm a Dolphins fan, it's fucking terrible. The Dolphins' offensive line is basically a turnstile. And that turnstile begins with Jesse Davis, who doesn't seem like he even knows how to play football. And with Tua Tagovailoa likely missing this game with the rib injury, Jacoby Brissett being the starter, this just seems like a disaster waiting to happen for Miami, and especially if they get down in this game because Derek Carr and the Raiders are on absolute fire right now, then they're not going to be able to throw the ball, or they're not going to be able to run the ball. They're going to have to throw the ball, and obviously, as a running back, that doesn't really help him out. Next up, we have running back of the New York Football Giants, Saquon Barkley, going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Barkley has entered the must-sit category at this point in the season. I've talked about sitting him in week 1 as well as week 2, and right now, even in this, what most would describe as a juicy matchup up against the Atlanta Falcons, I just can't do it. In week number 1 up against the Broncos, Barkley had 10 rushes for 26 yards, but he managed in that game to just have 1 catch for a single yard on 3 targets. We could all see the reduced workload coming at this point, because in week number 2, we're like, you know what? He's probably not going to do good again, but he has that 1 rush. People get excited. He rushes for 41 yards. Twitter fucking explodes. People are talking about how, hey, I was right about Saquon Barkley, blah, 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 blah. And then guess what happens? Despite having 41 yards on 1 rush, he had just 57 yards on the game on 13 carries with 2 receptions for 12 yards. Until Saquon Barkley breaks free of this snap count, of this reduced workload, then you can't feasibly start him. This matchup up against the Falcons may make you want to salivate. It may make you so excited to start Saquon Barkley, but I'm telling you right now, it is better to just sit him down on the bench because he could be a huge disappointment, just like he was last week up against the Washington Football Team. And speaking of the Washington Football Team, the next must-sit player is running back of the Washington Football Team, J.D. McKissic, going up against the Buffalo Bills this week. McKissic is in one of the most confusing situations in all of fantasy football because at the beginning of the season, he wasn't involved at all. Not even close to being relevant, right? He has 1 rush attempt and 1 target. Last season, in 2020, this guy is a focal point of this offense on 3rd down. He racked up over 110 targets on the season, but then in week number 1, he's useless. So I write him off. Everyone writes him off. No one's starting J.D. McKissic last week up against the Giants, and then guess what happens? He gets 4 rushes for 10 yards and a touchdown. Which, sure, that may happen every once in a while, but why did they put him in over Antonio Gibson in that scenario? And then he had 6 targets, 5 receptions, and 83 yards. So what's going to happen in week 3? It's probably going to be a mix of the two, where he's not necessarily irrelevant in fantasy football, but he doesn't score that touchdown. He doesn't get all those yards. So right now, I'm sitting down J.D. McKissic. He could have a good game up against the Buffalo Bills, but I just don't feel overconfident in starting this guy, and I worry that maybe we see more of week 1 production from J.D. McKissic when compared to week number 2. But real quick, before we get on into the final must-sit running back, if you guys are looking for season-long fantasy football coverage, then we have you covered. Our NFL Express Weekly Pass is available for $3.95. That's $3.95, and it is more expansive than ever, as it includes access to our trade value tool, strength of schedule tool, and fantasy streaming helper. With that, you will also get our NFL DFS player and ownership rankings, access to our 2-hour expert Slack chat, and everything we have to offer for NFL DFS showdown and single game contests. New this year to the package as well is projected ownership and and optimal lineup probabilities for tiers contests on DraftKings. Head on over to Awesemo Plus join page and pick up your pass for only $3.95. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Final running back here is Clyde Edwards-Helaire, running back of the Chiefs, going up against the Chargers. Now, most scenarios, you're probably going to have to start Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but if I'm being honest with you, maybe we can all, as a fantasy community, teach this man a lesson for being so bad in the first 2 games. It just appears that he stinks, costing the Chiefs the game on Sunday Night Football up against the Ravens with that fumble. Edwards-Helaire is averaging 3.3 yards per carry and just 1.5 targets per game. We expected him to have a decent target share in this offense, and it just appears to be non-existent. Just because the Chiefs are a great fucking team, just because Patrick Mahomes is there, they have this great team, just because Andy Reid is great, doesn't mean that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be great. Now, he could bounce back this week, but if you have other options, I'm likely sitting down Clyde Edwards-Helaire for those other options. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, maybe, like I said, maybe us just putting him on the bench in unity will teach this man a lesson. So thank you guys all for watching. I hope you did end up enjoying this video. If you did, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting the like button. I would appreciate that a ton. I love you guys. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please follow me at Notorious FNTSY, and make sure you guys get those 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum signing up using Yahoo for those first Yahoo DFS depositors. When it's your first time, please make sure you guys do that. Link down below in the description. I love you guys all so much. Have a great rest of your guys' day, as always. Goodbye.